Okay, so the legs are done. We just finished doing those. I think we're okay with that. Here, there we go. So let's put the body in there. So the body is here, make it visible. We'll lock the legs so I don't accidentally mess those up. So the body's a little bit, it's kind of cool that it's so in front of him. It's got a big tummy. I'm going to move him back a little bit, and we're going to have the body follow the legs now. So let's go ahead and do that. The body's here. So let's think about as you walk and as your hips raise and lower. So the body is going to need to, and this is all one thing. We're calling this hips, but my hips and shoulders are basically all kind of in the same place on this one single thing. This character doesn't have a neck or anything else. Shoulders is all one thing. But let's look at the body here. Where are we? There. So the body's going to rise and fall. I don't plan to actually do any of this kind of motion, forward, back, which I did with the legs, because I want to introduce the hips just by introduce the feeling the hips twisting by going into the body symbol and taking the vest and moving the vest left and right and skewing it and transforming it in a way that it looks like it's wrapping around this spherical body shape. And the other thing I want to do is introduce some squash and stretch and some bounce on the body to make it feel like it has some weight and some mass. We'll do that as some overlapping action. So that's what I know that's what I want to do. So let's kind of take that on. So I'm going to save this as my walk cycle 2, just in case I want to roll back and I go, or something goes horribly wrong and I can go back to an earlier version. I'm going to save it out. Okay, so let's examine what's happening here with these hips. Suggestion of the hips. It goes up. So this is our down, and this is our up. I mentioned earlier on I wasn't going to worry about doing additional poses for those and put my up and down in between the contact and pass to get a different type of quality walk, which can be done actually fairly easily once we get started on this. But my down is basically the contact and my up is basically the pass. That's a very simple way to do it. So I know that the body's going to rise and fall following that. Okay, let me take that out. And that keyframe should be the same as this. And also, I need to go inside of this symbol, the body symbol, and I need to extend my exposures out 25 frames as well, right? Because that's going to loop also another synchronized timeline, just like each leg was. Okay, so now, let's see. Do we have a way to guide? We have guides, so many guides everywhere already. Let's see. So what I want to think about is where's the pivot point for these hips? And without seeing them, without actually having to select them with the free transform tool to actually see the pivot, I know that if I turn my guides on for the either instance, you unlock them. There, this one. There. If I go into the upper leg here, which is locked, and I make these guides visible, I unguide them to make them visible. I pop back to where we're at this level. Now I'll see them. And if I outline them, now I have some crosshairs here. So I know that if I kind of find a point of reference on the body, a little closer in here, make some kind of point of reference on the body and have it move in relation to the hip pivots, that it'll feel like it's attached and driven by those hips. And what's interesting is the hips aren't always at the same level. They're matched up there, and then one hip is slightly higher than the other on the contact on the down positions. And that's actually nice because I'm moving my hand and you can't see it, but it feels like then that there's tilt happening. There's not only twist happening from front to back, but now there's tilt happening from one hip to the next, sort of in the Z axis, which is the axis that's coming straight out at the camera. So there's some tilt happening in the hips also. I don't necessarily, have any. This is very flat, just a ball. So I could introduce a little bit of tilt in there to make that feel like that's happening too. And I didn't do it in the original design, but I can give it a go here and kind of help amplify that feeling. So let's find. First of all, let's kind of find what feels natural for where this body should be in relation to the hips, just from maybe the contact position, because right now that's too high. So I'm going to select the body. Let me lock my legs again, just so I don't accidentally change that. So the body needs to drop a little bit. I'm just going to nudge it down until it feels. This is kind of nice here as a design thing, where that line cuts right up there. Boop, where the vest is. As long as that vest doesn't change, and it probably will at some point, but how's that feel? Pretty good? Well, let's start with that. So I know that silhouette-wise, all my contacts should be identical. So frame 1 and 25 should be the same, and they're slightly off, and I may have some synchronization issues happening there. And then 13 and 25 and 1 should be the same also. So they are pretty much. So for the body, at least, I can key that. I'm going to take a little diversion and see why is the silhouette of this contact different than this one. That one's good. That one's good. That one's a little bit off. So why is that the case? It's the far leg, right? The far leg is not the same here as it is here. And it might have to do with how it's looping. Let me go in here and see. I think I have an idea why that might be, but if we look at this, at the looping, and hopefully you're aware of what looping is, because this is not going to be a looping tutorial, but looping is a way to manipulate and or access a timeline of a symbol. Meaning, if I go into my near leg comp, it has its own independent timeline, all these frames. And if I want to manipulate which frame of this timeline for near leg comp we're looking at, I can do it with this looping. So I can scrub through basically and choose which one. So, and if I want to synchronize these and say, if this is frame 1, this should be frame 2, and I can go through here and select every single one and verify that that's the case. And it should be, but it may not be. But if I want to make sure that everything is spot on, what I can do is I can select this first frame of a tween span and select all of them, the whole span, just like that. And then I should go to timeline synchronize symbols, and it should verify that it's working correctly. Now on this one it's a little different, because the rear leg, it starts at frame 13, and then it should go 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. This should say frame 19. It does. Then 20, 21, this should say 22, 23, 24. I'm going to keyframe this just so that we can lock it down on 24 and make sure that it is. And then now this one should say 1. Okay. 2, 3, 4. Let's just do this. If we're going from 1 here, we can just synchronize these and we should be okay. Timeline, synchronize symbols. So here's where we're going to run into trouble maybe, because where are we at with this last one here? This last frame is 12. So is this one 13? We don't know because there's no keyframe there to verify. What is it? 13. So it's not a synchronization of the knee bend. It looks like it's a position thing. actually the transform of this symbol on the stage. So what happens if I take this and bring you over here? Now we're okay. It looks like our keyframes are all right. And this would be 12, and then I can set this to 13. It already knows to make it 13. We're okay. So I'm not sure why that happened. It had to do with tweening, I think, and maybe tweening to a target keyframe. We're locked down now. Whatever the case, it kind of doesn't really matter so much because I'm going to get rid of all these frames anyway, these 25s, because it's a 24 frame loop. But for now, we're okay. Actually, what I need to do is make 24 keyframe, all my frame 24s. So when I get rid of frame 25, it will still hold up as a loop. That's what we're headed towards. Okay. Anyways, back to the body now. A little diversion to make sure that I was locked down. But you know, you got to sweat the details sometimes. Okay. So now my silhouettes are. Frame 1 is frame 25. Let's do that so we can verify visually. So we're good. So now that's my up position on the body. Let's set the down on the pass. That's the down. The up is going to be on the pass as the hips raise. So this is what I was talking about, was finding a reference point for the hips and then matching it to the body. And let's just say, you know, we're like halfway between the cross of the hip joint and like where the hip the joint gizmo for the hip sort of tangents in with the leg line. About halfway through there is where the intersection of the vest and the body is. I can just kind of eyeball that without having to draw another guide in there. When I go up to here to make the passing position on the body, I can try to find the alignment of that. So I'll keyframe this and kind of nudge it up to where I said halfway between here and here is where that line was going to be. Let me zoom in on this a little bit better and explain what I'm talking about. So I said, okay, here's where the curve starts to diverge, this corner right there, where the curve of the joint gizmo diverges from the line of the leg. From there, and then this line here, this cross, I say about halfway between these two is where the vest and the body line cross. That was like my visual reference. I'm just trying to eyeball where that is here. So this is what I'm trying to line up with halfway between this corner and here. So about there and there. So that's why I was kind of like trying to find that. So just a rough estimation. And the same thing happening here. Just alt drag it. So there's my up, down, up, down. And let's tween that and see how it looks. I haven't eased any of my tweens yet, and I like to usually do easing, but for something like this, I'm gonna do the easing based on my position on the stage. Especially, I never want to have any eases on the legs, because if I ease, it's gonna favor, it's gonna take the uniform motion and regular motion out of the tracking of the feet. So I'm not going to worry about easing anything right now. So let's make this all solid and see how that looks. So that looks, I can live with that. It's pretty okay. There's a little bit of weirdness happening in here where I guess the butt, the leg joins up in that, and I'm not going to fuss with that too much. I think there's going to be enough. Hopefully I can distract your eye away from that with a lot of other things, but if that needs to be fixed, we can address that later on. Okay, so let's say I'm happy with that. I am happy with that. All right, so we're going to save this. All right, and now I said I wanted to put some twist in the body and some squash and stretch on the body as well. Let's do the twist first, because it'll be easier to track that without the bounce effect on there. So we're thinking about the hips. Remember, the near leg, the hip is front of axis here, and then as it sweeps through, it crosses to the center here. Hopefully you know this and would be telling this already, but there's the hip, and when it's making contact, it's in front of center of axis, it's on axis, and then it's behind it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is this is my center of mass. If my body is centered on that, that's my center of mass or center of gravity. So my hip is moving, it's in front of it, and then it swings through behind. And then the other leg is doing just the opposite, so we're getting some twist happening. So think about how I want to twist. I don't really have any point of reference for the hips on this drawing. It's just a blob. But I do have like where the shoulders are going to attach. So if I think of like my hips and my shoulders when I'm walking, how do they rotate in relation to each other? And if you can find opportunities to introduce opposition of things like hips and shoulders, it loosens up your character. It makes it a little more flexible. So rather than have the shoulder body, and his body's so tiny here that I could do it either way, honestly. I could have the whole body as one unit, sort of rotate in accordance with the hip, or I can do the opposite and say I want the shoulders to be, when the hips are forward, I want the shoulders to be back, and when the hips are back, I want the shoulders to be forward. And I think I want to do that just for the sake of contrast and to have more contrast and that type of appeal. So what does that mean? Well, hips are forward here on contact. That means hips are forward here. Hips are forward on contact. They're sweeping through and they're back on contact, and then they're forward here again. So in terms of the loop of the vest, which is going to tell us where the shoulder is, hips are forward on 1 and 25, which means the shoulders are going to be back on 1 and 25, and when the hips are back on 13, the shoulders are going to be forward on 13. So let's go ahead in here and set a keyframe for our vest on 13, because we know it's already back on 1, so let's move it forward on 13. And all I got to do is what I should do is I'm going to sort of squish it this way a little bit to make it feel like it's collapsing, and I'm going to also get my button back a little bit so let's tween that and see how it looks. And the button's not going anywhere at all, so I'm going to actually move it. I don't have much room to go here. I'm going to try to get this button to go as far. Here, let me get him to crop it off. I want the button to be more this way on this one. There we go. That's what I'm looking for, something like that. Super flat looking right now. I ran out of vest on the back end. That's a problem too. I need to get myself some more vest, so I need to take care of that. But let's see how that looks just in relation to... I got a little stutter in here, and the reason for that is whenever I was setting my tweens for the... I'm going to stop here because it feels like this is getting overwhelming. Let me stop. Hold that thought. So why is this twitch happening? Why does that look so terrible? Because whenever I go into here, it's fine. Okay, so let me back up and figure this out. And I know why this is. Because whenever I was setting the animation, the loop, and I said, okay, from here to here is great. And I was saying, okay, well, my contact positions, they're all, the body's down. And on the passing position, the body's up. And then I said, okay, well, I want this position to be the same as this one because they're both passing. So I just alt dragged the keyframe from, whatever this is, 7 to 19. And what I ended up doing was not only dragging the position, but also this keyframes everything. It keyframes the position on the stage, all the transforms, and it also sets a keyframe for my looping, for what frame of that internal timeline it is. And that's why there's a hitch in there, because I basically said, okay, it's going to play this frame from 1 to 7, and then it's going to go forward. And then here, since I duplicated this here, it's also going to say, oh, hey, make this frame 7. And that's why there's a little hitch in there, because on frame 7, it's not actually frame 7 of this timeline. It's playing through here, and then it's popping back here again. So that's why there's a little hitch in them. So how do I fix that? I can fix that with my synchronization. So I can just select all of these layers, and I can right click on this and say synchronize symbols, but you can't see, it's cropped off on my recording here. So I have to go up and find that up in here and say modify timeline, synchronize symbols. And that should take care of it. This should no longer be, this should be frame 19 instead of frame 7. It is. So now, let's see how that looks when it plays back. Let's loop it. So there's the twist anyways. That part of it's working. It's just his vest looks dumb because it's like a decal on the front half of his body only or something. So we got to make it like the vest wraps around the back of his body. All right, so let's do that. We're getting there. Let's go into here. And this is just a tweak to the art. So I'm going to go and double click on the vest. And I'm just going to, I can drag, whoops, go inside of the vest. It's already there. And I can drag this out. It's locked. Here, let's do this. That may be all it needs. It looks kind of ridiculous. Here, I'm gonna cut the back end of that off and drag that up a little bit. Maybe, how would that look? I guess like that. Maybe that works. Let's see. Going back here. Yeah, and there's more vest there. Actually, I guess it should come down. I think I got tailor here, but I guess it should start to break. You know, if your shoulders are sort of the mid part of that, what is it called? The axis of your body, and your back starts after, you know, once you go on the other side of your arms as your back. I guess this vest should break a little sooner. I'm really overthinking this, but why not? Okay, so let's get in here. And so we're saying maybe it's more like that. And I probably don't need nearly as much on the back side, but you know, it kind of doesn't matter, does it? Overthinking it again here. Let's. Whoa. Sometimes there's way too many points. Now I'm getting into the weeds here. There's too many points sometimes, and you know, I gotta take some points out. And you can just get in here if you're an Illustrator person and you're comfortable with working with Beziers. You can always use your sub-selection tool and just go right for the easy fix. There you go. So that I'm going to call that done. And now my vest pattern isn't there, and I'm going to let's go ahead and fix that. So the verticals for these. Get my selection tool back. Hey. There. All right. What am I on? Vertical. So I'm just going to take you. We're not going to see that much of it, do we? Well, like that. And then this one we'll bring over here. Take some of the curve out of this one. And then the horizontals are the same. And the verticals and horizontals are on different layers once again because if they're intersecting. So I kept them separate so I could do this. If they were all on the same layer, they would have flattened to each other. Where they intersected, they would have sort of flattened down, and it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, segments across instead of one unbroken span. Because I preserved their sort of what do we call it? Their separateness. All right. That looks amazing. So let's go ahead and see how that. All right, great. We can live with that. Okay, and then I said I wanted to put a little bit of north-south on there also, right? To play around with the idea that the hips are not only twisting but also tilting, and so I'm gonna have to think a little bit about this as I do it because I didn't do this on the other one, but let's go ahead and make it happen on this one. I'm going to give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll just undo it. We save this. Okay, so that's where the body's flat and even because my hips are aligned. Here is where the near leg is higher, so it would be, the vest would be higher up here, and then it's even, and then here's where the far leg is higher, so the vest would be down. So my passing, I'm even. On this contact, the vest is higher. On the other contact, the vest is lower. All right, so let's see what happens. So on one, oh boy, all right. So on 1, it's high. On 13, it's low. Okay. Did I accidentally put a keyframe on that? I think I did. I don't want a keyframe there. Okay, so let's go into the body. So, and I did it here too, weird. Okay, so on 1, so I need to put them on 7 and 19. Okay, so I said on 1 it's high. So we're going to crush it up a little bit. Maybe like, I don't want to go too high up. Maybe like that. Where were we? There on 1. So we're going to just nudge it up 1 and just squish it up a little bit. And then on 13 it's low, so we're going to nudge it down 1 and squish it down a little bit. And I don't know how that's going to, that may look terrible, but let's see. I'm going to drag that over there. Ha! That's a lot, but let's see how that works. That may be too much. I don't know. I think that's more than it needs, honestly. It's kind of a cool effect, but I'm not feeling as much twist in the hips there with what the legs are doing. Like if he was walking on, I don't know, if he had a really pronounced walk where you could really tell, but I kind of think that's just way too much. But now you know how to do that if you wanted to make it feel like it's twisting and rotating in 2 axes instead of 1. But I'm gonna revert. Okay, back to where we were. We're nearly done with this. So close. I'll just leave it at that. I think that's fine. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is the bounce, and this is fairly straightforward. I need to fix that again. Okay, so the bounce is a little squash and stretch on the body to make it feel like that there's some weight to this. And this is all, we call overlapping action or follow through sometimes. And it's just playing, it's expressing the idea that there's some inertia happening and some weight. And so let's go ahead and get into that and think, okay, well, what's happening is we're animating we can hide these legs just so we can focus only on the body, the ball. It's almost like a bouncing ball, right? The ball's bouncing. If we ignore the twist, the ball's bouncing, but it's really stiff. I want to give it a little bit of some looseness, so we're going to play with some squash and stretch. So what makes the ball squash and stretch? Well, imagine this is a big heavy beach ball or something, a yoga ball or something, and it's filled with water. It's like a giant water balloon. And you're going to push it up from the bottom because it's attached at the hips. If you're pushing something up from the bottom's going to push up first, and the top is not going to react right away because the ball's not rigid. It's going to be squishy. So if you push it up from the bottom, it's going to take a little while for the top to catch up to what's happening in the bottom. But the ball stays the same mass. So let's go to let's put a breakdown in the middle there, break 3. So we're going to push it up from the bottom. Like, let me do it without moving the pivot. I had it. Let me zoom in. There it was. There. So I'm holding Alt because if I scale it with the Alt key, it'll keep the opposite side locked, as opposed to if I scale without, it's going to scale it around the pivot, which in this case it's on this. It's odd that it's there, unfortunately, because it won't show me. But this way it's scaling around the pivot. Normally the pivot's in the center, and if you scale it without the Alt, it'll scale it around center, or else if you hold the Alt, it'll lock it. So my pivot was down at the bottom. So what I was trying to do was say, okay, well, we're scaling up from the bottom, but the top is going to be slow to react, so I'm going to push it up a little bit, like maybe that much. And then what's happening is it just shrunk. But we want to maintain our volume. So if something gets smaller in one dimension, it's going to push out in the other, right? That's what squash and stretch really is. So now all that water is still inside that water balloon. Didn't change the size of the balloon, it just changed the shape of it. So if it gets smaller in one dimension, it gets bigger in the other. And it's a little too wide. All right, so let's see. Whoop. So that does that, and then it catches up at top, and then on the way down, it's the same thing, except slightly different, right? Because if we're leading, we're still leading with the hips. We're still leading with the bottom edge of this. So if the ball is dropping now, if you're pulling it from the bottom, the top is going to be slow to catch up. So the top's going to stay where it was. It's going to want to stay closer to way up here. So I can just say, okay, well, I can do that. We'll just pull it up here, and then we will squish it in, because remember, it's not getting bigger, it's just getting skinnier. So to maintain the volumes, if you're getting bigger in one dimension, you're getting smaller in the other. So that should work. Now it's going to be the same exact thing the other time. So I can just take all these keyframes and just say, you know what, I'm going to go from 1 to 13 and just duplicate it. Alt drag it over for the second half. And once again, I broke my synchronization. But if I select my first frame, the whole span from the first frame, and where are we? Modify timeline, synchronize symbols, it should fix it. So now I have, let's see, how's that look? Whoop, whoop, a little bouncy. Let's put it on the 24 frame loop. Oops. Zoom out. There's some bounce in there now. And then let's turn the feet on, the legs, and see how they look. There we go. So that's working. I think that a little too much squish, but in the interest of time, we'll stop it here. I can make some tweaks, but I'm maybe take some of that squish out and give it a little more north-south on the bounce. But otherwise, we're ready to move on to the head next. So let's go ahead and do that.